Good morning and welcome to the Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station update. We're joining the International Space Station Flight Control team in the Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Mission Control Center in Houston, where the Orbit 2 team is on console at this time. They're led today by Flight Director Paul Dye with Jack Fisher in the Capcom seat.
Well, I cannot.
On board the International Space Station, the Expedition 31 crew has been awake since 1 a.m. Central Time and are now more than halfway through their day. After a whirlwind of activity surrounding last week's SpaceX undocking, and before that the arrival of both the SpaceX vehicle and the Soyuz TMA-04M, activities are finally getting back to normal. For a little while anyway. For the six-man crew on board the space station, we're currently orbiting 249 miles above the North Pacific Ocean, heading south towards the tip of South America. The crew includes Commander Oleg Kononenko and U.S. flight engineers Don Pettit and Joe Acaba, as well as European flight engineer Andrei Kuipers and Russian flight engineers Gennady Padalka and Sergei Revin. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit have been at the space station since December. They launched into space on December 21st and docked on the 23rd. Now, with 166 days in space and 164 at the space station, they're coming up on the end of their sojourn. They're scheduled now to return to Earth on July 1st. Their crewmates, Acaba, Padalka, and Revin, only just arrived and will be staying behind when they leave. They launched from Baikonur on May 14th and arrived at the space station on May 16th, so they're currently at 20 days in space, 18 at the space station. They won't be along for long, however, after Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit leave. They're going to be joined in a couple of weeks after that by what will by then be the rest of the Expedition 32 crew. That's Sonny Williams, Yuri Malenchenko, and Aki Hoshide. Those three are scheduled to launch from Baikonur on July 15th. Preparations for all of these activities are ongoing, both here on the ground and in space. Williams, Malenchenko, and Hoshide are currently at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia, and today they took part in a suited simulation. Meanwhile, on board the space station, Pettit and Acaba are going to be spending an hour together later today for handover activities and preparation for Pettit's departure. Meanwhile, work goes on in space as well. Today the crew has a mix of science and maintenance activities on their agenda. Don Pettit is performing his final session of the VO2 Max experiment, which documents changes in the crew members' maximum oxygen uptake while they're in space. And he's also changing out filters in 3 of the 4 crew quarter compartments on the U.S. side of the space station. Joe Acaba has spent much of his morning in the Quest airlock. You can see a video of his work there earlier today, performing some regular maintenance of the U.S. spacesuit's cooling water loops. And then later today, he'll be going over procedures for the BASS experiment. That's an acronym for Burning and Suppression of Solids, a study of whether materials burn as well in microgravity as they do in normal gravity. Andrei Kuipers has been working in the Japanese Kibo laboratory with the Ryute rack. Ryute means fluid in Japanese, and the equipment is used for fluid physics experiments, among other things. You can see him working with that rack in this video, also recorded from earlier this morning. He's got it tilted out of basically the wall of the space station there. Its image processing unit power supply had a short circuit in January, so Kuipers was removing the unit today, and Pettit is going to be replacing the power supply in it tomorrow. And finally, on the Russian side of the space station, cosmonauts were also participating in a couple of science experiments. Gennady Padalka was scheduled to work on both the Kolinovsky crystal experiment, which studies the effect of microgravity on charged particles in a magnetic field, and the constant experiment, which looks at how spaceflight influences fermentation. That's what's been going on in space today, and this is Mission Control Houston.